Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabantu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Hare Krishna, guys. It's me, the old school monk, and I'm smiling and happy that you're here. Thanks for joining me today. There's a breeze a breeze blowing through the RuneScape world. The sailing has been released. At the time of recording, it isn't yet released. I'm recording this on the Monday, so it's coming out in 2 days, but there's a lot of excitement about this freshness, this new gameplay to become immersed in, and I think the YouTube space is a place that allows us to immerse ourselves in different narratives. There's so many YouTube videos out there about people's sort of one chunk Iron Man account, or, you know, maxing series, this series, that series. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of us RuneScape players are attracted to, is this sense of becoming immersed in an alternate reality from our own, I guess, IRL reality, you know. It's an appealing thing, and it's also quite a childlike thing, and not in a bad way. I think a lot of children naturally have a vast imagination, and so like some of us really like to live in our kind of inner child way through imagining a scenario or role-playing. You know, that's what Dungeons and Dragons and all of these different kind of role-playing outlets are essentially for, is to allow us to kind of enter that space. And I see it a lot. A lot of our generation is really interested in escaping through one of these kind of childlike mediums. Like, I don't know if I've mentioned on this channel, but there was a while there where I got pretty deep into collecting kind of vintage Pokemon cards, and I think in the future I'll make a little video about me selling them, because I'm getting to a point where I'm ready to renounce them. But within that space, I definitely noticed that a lot of like grown adults were entering into that childlike, innocent place, and these Pokemon card conventions can become a place where there's a lot of people walking around in that kind of unfiltered version of themselves. Because, you know, to live in the modern world, or to live in your working world, or to be an adult, you have to kind of put up different armors and different barriers to protect yourself, or to at least appear to be a certain way. But I remember I went to a Pokemon card convention, and there was this big old I don't know, he's probably like 30, a Muslim gentleman, you know, he had the beard, and he was just looking really upset, you know. And I said, what's the matter, bro? And he said, I just bought this mystery pack. I bought this mystery slab, like a Pokemon card PSA graded slab, and it wasn't the slab that he wanted. I said, show me that then. And he goes, look, it's rubbish. And he showed me it, and it was a really cool card. It was some like Diglett E-series card, which I can put a picture of on the screen. And I thought, you know, that's pretty cool, bro. What did you want? And he said, well, I've been collecting like Japanese cards, blah blah blah. So I was like, all right, cool. I opened my binder and just gave him like a bunch of Japanese cards, exact type that he was collecting. And he was like, what? This is amazing. And I saw that kind of childlike, because he was having a sulk the same way like a 6-year-old would have a sulk because he didn't get what he wanted, you know. And I gave him the cards that he wanted, and he lit up. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cute. You know, he's a big, scary, bearded guy, but really he's just a little child. And he's vulnerable, you know. And I think that's basically a truth for all of us, is that, you know, we put on our suit of armour, we look tough, we move around the world in a way that we can protect ourselves, But really, inside, we're very gentle and vulnerable and scared. And so I think, like, maybe I'm analysing this wrong, but I think a lot of times we play our games and we escape into our worlds and our narratives as a means of reawakening that, or at least living with that version of ourself, which is like most of the time is crying out from behind the armour, you know. And that's the thing, you get into psychology and you start to see that so many of the ways that we react and the ways that we act are all a response to a younger part of ourselves, to a sort of unprocessed emotion or an unexpressed fear, you know, or some sort of loss. And so, like, it seems like there's a big wave in this modern generation of us that are really trying to escape or live in that space, in that childlike space. And yeah, that's what that is. And I think I was thinking, like, when I started this particular YouTube channel, like, I've never really been into the what am I saying? When I started the YouTube channel, I remember I started, like, building this narrative about this character Ben XI, and, you know, how I can't remember how like, he was like a free-to-play guy, and then he went to Valamore and climbed upon the mountain and trained his prayer, and he went away and became a monk. And yeah, I remember I was, like, into this role-playing character narrative. And at some point I just kind of lost like, I didn't care about that narrative that I'd created anymore, because a greater narrative was pressing upon me, you know. In other words, the narrative of my kind of IRL character, you know, like my physicality and my identity within this world was calling. And so I dropped it, you know. And this identity that we have within this world, the Vedas call it ahankara, which means false ego. You know, you hear that term a lot in psychology, is this idea of ego. And to have an ego is a completely natural aspect of being a living entity. So to deny the ego is a big mistake. And that's what a lot of, like, these, I mentioned it last time, but these kind of Mayavad interpretations of the truth, they try to deny the self sometimes, or they try to, like, crush desire, you know, delete desire. Desire causes suffering, therefore delete desire and you won't suffer. But that's half the picture, you know. You can't delete your desire, and you can't delete the fact that you're a person, because it's just an intrinsic aspect. It's like telling water to stop being wet. If you stop water from being wet, then it's not water, I'm afraid. I don't know what it is. Maybe, but it's not the original thing. So that's the thing, is, like, we have this identity and this narrative and this ego within this world, but it's a false ego. In the same way as we might create a little story and a narrative for our RuneScape character, but it's a false narrative and a false creation. You know, it's not actually real. Like, I wasn't actually Ben XI, the character that went to Valamore and trained prayer. That was just some fiction that I made up for my own entertainment. And so when the higher reality beckoned, in other words, when my real life ego, identity, was saying, look, you're not doing so great here. You need to get your stuff together, you know, you got to get a proper job and start being a responsible adult. When that higher reality started speaking, then I started to drop my attachment to the lower narrative. And I think that's the whole phenomenon of spiritual awakening, is that is that, but a level up. The whole phenomenon of spiritual awakening is, okay, I'm in this IRL, I'm in my real life, I've got my hobbies, my interests, the sports that I like to play, the music I like to listen to, the friends that I like to speak to, so on and so forth. But when a person has a spiritual awakening, he realizes that, wait a second, this is also some form of like false narrative. It's not really who I am. And the reason it's not who I really am is because that stuff, your status, your music, your friends, your job, so on and so forth, that is always changing. It's never fixed. It's never eternal. And a person having a spiritual awakening starts to glimpse that they have an eternal reality. Like they're a soul that's existed for longer than just this account. Because this one life that we live in is like one RuneScape account, isn't it? It's like you're born, you go through a certain story, and then you die. And it's the same with any of your RuneScape accounts. Some are born, you might get off Tutorial Island, and then you never log in again. Some people are born and they get 200 mil in every skill and complete the collection log. But eventually, they're not going to log in again. So therefore, it's not the real reality. And actually, there's a higher reality that we have to wake up to. And that sometimes we have to let go of the lower reality. In the same way as when I was like, okay, I need to stop putting so much energy into this role-playing narrative of this character that I got, and actually start focusing on my real-life responsibilities. In the same way as you drop the lower thing, when you start entering into that spiritual understanding, then you start to drop the lower thing of this of this kind of worldly reality. But that's the thing. It's not so simple and cut and dry as that. And that's the unique and actually very beautiful feature of Krishna consciousness, also known as Bhakti Yoga, also known as the path of surrendering to God with love and devotion. I don't know if it's known as that, but I just dubbed it that. And that's the difference, that's the unique feature, is that Arjuna, who is a great warrior on the battlefield, he gets to the point of fighting, and he suddenly has this like realization that this fight is gonna he's gonna have to kill people, and he's gonna have to kill his own family members, and he becomes very bewildered, and he says, look, one of his reasons for not fighting, because he gets to a point where I don't want to fight. And he says to Krishna, he says, look, I'm not going to fight. I'm a spiritual person. There's no point in causing this suffering to others. I think it's better if I just retreat to the forest and become a yogi and renounce this worldly situation that I find myself within. And Krishna, he kind of chuckles, and he says, look, Arjuna, by nature you are a warrior, In other words, the situation you find yourself in today is that you're one of the best warriors in the whole world. This fight that we're about to fight is for a good purpose. Evil has overtaken the earth, and you're supposed to rise up and fight against evil. And he says, look, all of the enemies are already put to death by my arrangement, but you just have to be an instrument. And that's the thing, is you'd think, okay, I find myself in my real life. I think I've shared stuff on the channel before. I've done building, I've done artwork. I've never really been career driven, but I've got certain features, qualities, attributes within this world which could be used and could flourish. And I went away and I did my spiritual training in the monastery as a monk, and then left the temple, and found myself in the same material position, living in my own battlefield, with my own doubts, my own fears, my own worries, my own questions, And the conclusion is like, no, I understand that I'm a spirit soul and I'm completely free from this world, that I'm an eternal being, and everything in this life is temporary, but I haven't actually realized that. That's theory. And the method prescribed for realizing it is actually to work in this world, to act in this world, or as Arjuna, to fight on the battlefield. But instead of doing it for personal motivation, instead of doing it for sense gratification, and for name and fame and acclaim and gain, instead of doing it for all these things, you do it for God. So you work for God, and the way you do that is you work and you offer the fruits of your labor to Krishna, to God, to an organization that's propagating spirituality, and that's for you to your discretion. And in doing so, by living in this consciousness that everything is actually an offering to God, and that I'm just a servant and I'm not supposed to be the central figure of life, then, as Krishna says, all of the enemies are put to death by my arrangement. All of the arrangements have been made for your success. This is how we could say it. So, if we live a life where actually I'm trying to do this for God and I want to please God, and I accept that God is my guardian, that anything that comes to me, whether it be good or bad, is the grace of God. There's a lesson, there's a teaching, there's something within every situation that comes my way. If I live my life in that fashion, then gradually, the scales begin to tip, and things do become less for my material pleasure, for my gratification, because my mind says it, I do it. And it becomes more and more, no, I want to please God. No, I want to serve humanity. No, I want to be selfless, loving servant. I want to use my talents, my skills, my attributes, my many limbed things which could help the world. I want to use them to help the world instead of just to help myself. Because you can do philanthropy, you can do worldly charity, you can provide people with worldly comforts, so on and so forth, but it's going to have a temporary effect, Whereas if you start leaning into transcendental life, if you start, we hear it in the Bible, be in this world but not of it. I don't know. But that's the point, is just as RuneScape isn't real life, real life isn't real life, There is a reality that is far beyond the confines of your mind, Because we don't see with our eyes, we see with our mind. We see according to what's going on inside us. Like, say you break your arm. I literally just broke my wrist 3 months ago. And, I had an x-ray, and the doctor showed me the x-ray and says, I looked at the x-ray, I'm like, I cannot see a thing. I don't know what I'm looking at. It's a load of black and white marks. It looks a bit like a skeleton. I can't see a break. I don't know what I'm looking at. But the doctor, he shows me the x-ray and he can see the information. He's looking at the same exact photons as I'm looking at. Like, we're seeing the same exact image. But because he's got knowledge, he understands what the picture is saying, And it's the same exact thing for us, is we all have a similar perception. Like, me and you could look at the same exact tree. But based on what's going on inside me, and based on what's going on inside you, we see a different picture. And that's the thing, is if we gradually hear, we can only know this information by hearing. If we hear this reality that, no, I'm not material, I'm spiritual, I'm more than this. And if we hear like that and constantly expose ourselves and associate with persons that are on the same wavelength, then we start to shape our consciousness. We start to see, nah, this is all for God, and everything has been given to me by God, and every situation is the personal medicine of the Lord. If we start to hear that idea and then live it, then gradually over time it becomes the reality. Oh yeah, and and you start to see the signs. You start to see it linking up and making sense, and miracles happen in your life, and the whole world becomes a conversation with God. I'm struggling. I open my computer, and the perfect video falls into my feed. The algorithm is a very complicated thing. It's so complicated that God can easily hide within it, He can easily pull some strings and send the right video to you today, But I think that's one aspect of it, is Arjuna had to go and fight. In other words, he had to go and be active. If you're not familiar with the Bhagavad Gita, I can link. I read the whole Bhagavad Gita on one video maybe a year ago. But essentially it's a conversation between Arjuna the warrior and God, Krishna. And Arjuna's bewildered, he cannot fight. And then Krishna gives him the whole philosophy of reality, the whole philosophy of life, and says, now stand and fight. Now, for us as individuals, we can listen to philosophy. We can sit there and hear the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. But it's a little bit useless and theoretical until you stand and fight. Until you apply it to your life. And applying it to your life, what does that look like? It means praying. It means asking God to make the path clear. Wave it in my face. Show me the light. Illuminate my vision. Because that's it. It's Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam patipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam jenamamu padantite. He gives us the intelligence by which we come to him. Because God's within and without. He's within your heart. He knows you very well. And if you sincerely ask, knock and a door shall open. If you sincerely look for that Krishna, if you look for God, if you look for however it comes, it will come. But you got to look, you got to act, you got to fight, you got to stand up and inquire and find people. Go to a Hare Krishna temple. Try it. It might not be right for you. It was right for me in the time, the place, the circumstance. And if you're interested in hearing the story of how I became a monk and how I entered this whole path, I reckon that could be a banging video. So leave a comment if you want to see that, okay? And I will endeavour to make it. But that's the thing, we got to stand and fight and look for the things. Because I don't think you're going to find God sailing on RuneScape. But maybe I could be wrong. The Lord works in mysterious ways. The Lord works in mysterious ways. But yeah, I'm just out here trying to shape my mind to be able to see God's hand in everything, Because one thing I've realized, as things in my life get stripped away from me, as attachments get pulled, I realize that the one thing and the only thing that I have is faith. This faith is all I have. And it's something that cannot be stripped away from a man. You can lose your house, you can get your clothes stripped and thrown in the street and have nothing to your name. But no man can strip faith away from you, And what is faith? Faith is unflinching trust in something divine. Faith is understanding that by serving God, all of my difficulties will be dealt with. All of my toil and my strife and my trouble will be put to rest. And this faith is all I have. Okay? So, take that how you will. Okay? I love you, bro. I'll catch you again. Hare Krishna.